Only he can win the war. If he continues a little bit longer, a week or two, Iran will be bankrupt. And when it's bankrupt, it will not have enough food, not have enough fuel, not have enough key consumer commodities, and the people will be very restive. But the question now that we're looking at, will the pressures that surround him in a 360-degree fashion force Trump to relent when he's inside of a spectacular and historic?
A 360-degree pressure campaign from the hard left, from edgy Republicans, from Europe, from Tucker Carlson quoting the Book of Daniel, from the War Powers Act clock ticking toward day 60. Iran has no military left, no money, and a population on the edge of revolt. And the single question standing between a historic victory and a squandered one is whether Donald Trump can hold on against everyone pushing him to stop. That tension is what this video is about.
We have a blockade on Iranian shipping going in and out, Iranian-bound shipping going in or out of Iran, as well as the Iranians are claiming that they too are trying to stop shipping that is pro-Western or related to the United States. We don't really know who we are dealing with. We don't know whether it's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps or the Army or the elected, what's left of the elected government, or the theocrats themselves. They're all vying for power. They're all arguing with each other. So it's a very complicated situation in Iran, even though they're prostrate. They don't have any military or economic capability left. And yet they remain defiant. Now, why do they remain defiant when they are the next cycle of this war could knock out their bridges, their electrical power, and destroy what's left of their military? And we could do it very easily. They believe that Donald Trump is on a tightrope, that he has certain constraints, prohibitions that are self-imposed upon him through political calculus, or there are outside criteria that will force him to stop his neutering of Iran and will allow them at some point to rearm. What are those? Well, first of all, they are watching the midterm elections very carefully, and they're looking at the polls, and they feel that the Democratic Party is a great ally, the leftist especially in it, the hard left. They look at Tim Walz, the former failed presidential nominee of the Democratic Party. He was in Spain this week at an international socialist conference. Spain, remember, is very anti-American, has refused American use of its NATO base and airspace. And what did he say? He said that our war effort, now he's talking about our soldiers at war against Iran during periods of intense combat. He is saying that they are fascists, that the whole idea was fascist. And when Iran hears that, they think, well, if a former vice president nominee of the United States is siding with us, then maybe Trump will relent. There's also edgy Republicans. They want to, of course, they have to be reelected to carry out the MAGA agenda. Some of them are looking at their internal polls and saying the price of gas is hurting us. We're not paying attention to the economy. We have under 7 months before the midterms. At some point, Mr. President, you got to pivot. Then there's the Democrats. They've threatened the War Powers Act. We're at day 50, and they're at days 60 to 90, they can cut off funds. Now, they don't have the votes in the House to do that, or the Senate, but they feel there's enough renegade Republicans worried about their own seats that they might get some defections, something to worry about. By the way, Barack Obama didn't worry about it at all. He bombed Libya for 7 months without even consulting Congress. He had a Democratic Congress, and he thought that whatever he did would be rubber stamped, and he was absolutely correct. The Europeans, they're kind of like a carrion force. They look at this. They didn't do anything to help. They did a lot of things to hamper our efforts on Iran. But they feel that the heavy lifting is over, and they might just sort of creep back with an armada, 1 or 2 ships per country, 20 or 30 countries, and then they can say they open the strait, get back in the good graces of the United States, and patrol this crucial conduit that they export into and import oil out of. So they're trying to tell Trump, stop the kinetic action, let us in, please, please.
What's being described in that segment is not a military situation. The military situation is resolved. What's being described is a political siege, and the people running it are not in Tehran. They're in Washington, in Brussels, in Madrid, and on podcast platforms with 8-figure audiences. Start with the Iranian calculation because it is rational given what they're observing. They have no military. They have no revenue. Their command structure is fractured between the IRGC, the regular army, the remnants of the elected government, and the theocrats, each faction vying for position, each afraid to be the one that looks compliant when the accounting comes. By any conventional measure, they should be submitting. They're not. And the reason they're not is that they are reading the American domestic political environment with more sophistication than most American commentators are giving them credit for. They watched Tim Walz, the former vice presidential nominee of the Democratic Party, travel to Spain, the NATO ally that refused American use of its bases and airspace, and address an international socialist conference. And at that conference, while American soldiers are in a live theater, he called the entire war effort fascist. When a figure of that profile makes that statement in that location, Iran hears something specific. The political opposition inside the United States is actively working to delegitimize this campaign, and they may have enough leverage to stop it. That is not a paranoid reading. That is a straightforward interpretation of the evidence available to them. Then there are the edgy Republicans, a category that deserves more analytical attention than it's getting. These are not ideological opponents of the campaign. These are members who voted for the MAGA agenda, who support the border policy and the energy policy and the deregulation agenda, but who are looking at their internal polling and seeing gas prices and economic anxiety translating into electoral vulnerability. They are doing the arithmetic of self-preservation. 7 months before midterms, some of them are quietly signaling to the White House that a pivot is needed. That pressure is real, it is growing, and it does not require bad faith, just the ordinary political calculus of members who need to survive an election to govern at all. The War Powers Act clock is the legal dimension of the same pressure. Day 50 becomes day 60, becomes the window where Congress can theoretically cut off funds. Democrats don't have the votes alone, but they don't need them alone. They need a handful of Republican defections from members nervous about their seats, and the dynamics described above make that scenario at least plausible. Obama bombed Libya for 7 months without this problem, because he had a Democratic Congress that rubber-stamped whatever he did. Trump does not have that luxury, and the opposition knows it and is using it. The European dimension is the most cynical piece of the picture. These are governments that refused airspace, refused basing rights, refused every meaningful form of assistance during the heavy phase of the campaign. Now that the strait has been opened by American naval power and the hard work is done, they want back in. 1 or 2 ships per country, a flotilla of 20 or 30 nations, and suddenly they can claim credit for securing the waterway they refused to help fight for. The ask wrapped around that re-entry is the same. Stop the kinetic action, declare success, step back. Let Europe patrol the strait it didn't help open, and call it multilateralism. The shamelessness of the positioning would be remarkable if it weren't so predictable. Every one of these pressures is independently manageable. The problem is they are arriving simultaneously, from different directions, each with a different leverage point. That is what 360-degree pressure looks like, and it is being coordinated, not in a conspiratorial sense, but in the organic sense that multiple actors with aligned short-term interests are all pushing in the same direction at the same moment. Iran is watching all of it and counting on it to do what their military could not. Stop the campaign before the final phase of economic collapse triggers the internal uprising that ends the regime.
At home, he's got, in addition to the Republicans who are worried about and with good reason, and their careers, he's got the fanatic left. He's also got a kind of a fanatic right. This week, Tucker had a guest on, and they were quoting the book of Daniel from the Bible about the Antichrist, and the argument, thinly veiled, was that Donald Trump and the Iranian war fit the prophecies and the narrative of Daniel, who was talking about a king, i.e. the Antichrist, who would have success in the Middle East, but then, of course, fail and meet his fate. It was almost a wish as much as a prophecy. Marjorie Taylor Greene, once a fanatic Trump supporter without power now, she's out of Congress, but she's now peddling the conspiracy theory that Trump really wasn't the target of a real assassin in Butler, Pennsylvania, that he may have had help staging the incident. That's really loony. Of course, Candace Owens is now not just regretting her vote for Trump, but arguing that he's a very pernicious, almost a satanic figure. This is really unusual, that somebody who was fanatically pro-Trump, as these three were, and were habitués at Mar-a-Lago, all of a sudden would not just say, well, I agree with him with 80% of his agenda, but the 20% I can't go along with. But they've turned not just against him, but many of their positions and much of their rhetoric is not that much different than the hard left today. We don't know where they're going to end up, but they're on a trajectory to join the never-Trumpers at the Bulwark, perhaps. And then there's also worry about the weapons shortage. We had not invested heavily enough in quantity. We have good quality of weapons, the best in the world, but we don't have enough Tomahawk missiles. We don't have enough Patriot missiles. And we need to have our stocks replenished and have them replenished quickly. And if this war were to go on another 3 or 4 weeks, we would not be able to achieve the level of competency that we had in the first 4 weeks, simply because we would be hoarding and worrying about weapons that would be short. Put this all together and explains a couple of things that are otherwise inexplicable. Why, after Iran has been militarily destroyed, it has a restive population that at almost any minute that it feels they can survive, they will rebel. And economically, it was already in a period of depression, and now it's losing all of its revenue and it's just about ready to implode. Why, with all this, does Iran keep saying that it's winning? And why do people put pressure on Donald Trump as if he's losing? And the answer is the war is not necessarily about just military affairs alone. It's politics. And Trump's enemies at home and abroad feel that if they can drag it out, and if Donald Trump, for a variety of reasons, can't turn the tactical victory to long-term strategic success, he will be vulnerable. And all of his economic progress that he's made so far, which is pretty impressive, the idea that he ended illegal immigration, the ability to flip Venezuela from an arch enemy into a successful state without any losses, all of that will be endangered, and he will be neutered in the midterm elections. And so therefore, Donald Trump is winning on the battlefield, but he has to keep going somehow and nullify all of these centrifugal forces around him that are hoping for his defeat. And yet, in the end, only he can win the war. If he continues a little bit longer, a week or two, Iran will be bankrupt. And when it's bankrupt, it will not have enough food, not have enough fuel, not have enough key consumer commodities, and the people will be very restive. But the question now that we're looking at, will the pressures that surround him in a 360-degree fashion force Trump to relent when he's inside of a spectacular and historic?
Tucker Carlson quoting the book of Daniel. Marjorie Taylor Greene suggesting the Butler assassination attempt may have been staged. Candace Owens calling Trump a satanic figure. These are not measured policy disagreements. These are people who were fanatical Trump supporters 18 months ago, and the trajectory they're on, as the segment notes, points directly toward the bulwark, toward the never-Trump ecosystem, toward positions that are functionally indistinguishable from the hard left on the specific question of this war. That journey should be examined carefully, because it tells you something important about what happens when personal proximity to a political figure replaces analytical independence. The argument made in the previous segment about these critics applies here with even more force. People who cultivated intimate relationships with Trump, who were Mar-a-Lago regulars, who considered themselves family adjacent, who built their brands in part on that proximity, experienced his decision to pursue this campaign as a personal betrayal. And personal betrayal produces a different kind of response than policy disagreement. It produces escalation. It produces the book of Daniel. It produces staged assassination theories. The emotional logic of the betrayed ally is not constrained by proportion. The weapons shortage is the one genuinely serious structural concern in this entire segment, and it deserves to be separated from the political noise surrounding it. Tomahawk stockpiles, Patriot missile inventories. The United States has the best weapons in the world, and not enough of them at the quantities this kind of sustained campaign requires. That is a real constraint. If the campaign extends another 3 or 4 weeks beyond its current point, the operational pace of the first month cannot be maintained. That is not defeatism, it is logistics. And it is the kind of problem that should have been addressed in the defense procurement cycle years ago, which is a critique of institutional inertia that predates this administration by multiple presidencies. But here is the strategic reality that all of the noise obscures. Iran is 1 to 2 weeks from bankruptcy. Not budget shortfall, bankruptcy. No food import capacity, no fuel, no key consumer goods. A population already at the edge of rebellion that will tip into open revolt when the basic mechanics of daily survival collapse. The regime knows this. That is why they remain publicly defiant despite having nothing left to be defiant with. Because defiance is the only signal left that might convince the political forces arrayed against Trump to deliver the rescue Iran cannot deliver for itself. The question at the end of the segment is the right one, and it has no clean answer. Will the 360-degree pressure force a relent at the threshold of a historic victory? The honest answer is that it might. Not because the military situation warrants it, but because political sustainability is a real constraint, and the pressures being described are real. What is also true is that the cost of stopping now, giving Iran a lifeline it will use to reconstitute, rearm, and resume the nuclear trajectory, is a cost that will be paid later by someone at much higher price. That is the calculation sitting in front of the one person who actually controls the outcome.